The Richie Allen Show, live on Talk Radio Europe, Fab Radio International, and DavidIcke.com. And now, live from Manchester, England, here is Richie Allen.
What else could anybody say about David Icke? 25 years ago, as he's told himself, he met a legendary and a much beloved psychic healer called Betty Shine, and it set him on a journey that was to become truly epic. And it's only a few short weeks ago that he celebrated 25 years of that journey. I don't know of anybody whom is now familiar with the information that we talk about on this programme. I don't know of anybody who hasn't picked up a David Icke book or hasn't found out some information from watching David, from going on his website, as I said, from reading his books over the last 25 years. He's had a really busy last few years of it. He's had a little bit of a break recently. We'll talk about that. But we'll also talk about some exciting plans that he has for the year ahead. Check out his website, davidicke.com. I'm not going to say much more. I'm just going to introduce my mate and somebody I'm very proud of. David Icke, welcome back. How are you?
Hello, Rich.
You sound great, my friend. Now, you were unwell for a bit. We better get that out of the way first. Loads of people saying, upset you were unwell. Didn't like hearing that. How are you?
I'm okay. It's one of those things where something happens to you and you think, what's going on? And then you kind of sit and ponder on it and you think, why didn't it happen before? Because what happened was I got really ill must be 6 weeks ago. And it was something going around the Isle of Wight. People I know had the same symptoms. And it really was something that knocked you onto the floor. And that was the last straw for my body, really. And what happened in the aftermath of that is I got something which is known as adrenal burnout or adrenal fatigue. My great friend and a genius healer, Mike Lambert, at the Shen Clinic on the Isle of Wight, told me what it was immediately on day one, because he dealt with it many times. Most doctors have never heard of it. They don't understand it. But then I came across a book which Mike gave me just about adrenal burnout. And I was reading through it and I was laughing because not only did it include every symptom I had, it included the symptoms happening at certain times of the day, which they were for me. It's very strange because there were certain times of the day when the symptoms went and then certain times when they came back. And what's the cause of it is long-term uninterrupted stress and overwork. Because what happens is the adrenal glands get depleted and they produce hormones that deal with stress and deal with, when you're under physical or emotional stress or whatever. And they stop working, stop dealing with it. And that starts to knock the whole body's hormonal balance out of kilter. And it produces many symptoms, one of which is extreme fatigue. So I'm sitting here tonight, mate, and I'm doing a live interview for the first time since I had it. So I'm interested as much as anybody if I'm going to get to the end.
Brilliant. There's no contingency plan, Icke. So
no, there isn't. No, just play a record, Rich.
we got plenty of records. That being said, you have chosen a couple of songs, and when you feel like dropping a song in to give you a chance to stand up and walk around the room and have a glass of water, just tell me. You've got some good music lined up. That's brilliant. Now, there are lots of questions coming in. I have said to people already, they'll be limited to one question or comment, and we'll get through as many of them as we possibly can. We're not going to take news at the top of this hour. We're going to plough through. We will of course, maybe take a bit of music, but we're going to do that. Do you know what, David? A number of people said to me today, and this is true, if people don't believe this, they can go onto the Twitter page. How would David sum up the general election in one word? I would add a caveat to that. You can't use a word beginning with B.
Right.
That limits it then.
Well, just to finish the point about the health, and then I'll come on to that. I've got the word, Rich. When I look back at the last 25 years, as you say, I passed 25 years since walking into Betty Shine's front room in 1990, just a few weeks ago. Funnily enough, I passed it with this illness, which gave me a lot of pondering time to look at the last 25 years and where I go from here. And like I say, it was an elephant in the living room when I looked at it, because I look back at the fantastic levels of ridicule that I got in 1991 onwards with the Wogan show and what followed, when you couldn't walk down any street without being laughed at by most of the people anywhere you went. And although it was a gift in one way, because it cleared me out of caring what other people think, and I've really reached a point now where that is, almost total. I really don't care. People think what they like, but I think what I like. But emotionally and energetically, that still stays around in the subconscious and affects you. And then there's all the overwork and over the period of the last 25 years. In fact, since 2002, I've also been fighting 3 court cases, sometimes 2 at a time, 2 of them on the other side of the world, as well as doing the work and as well as doing the traveling. We're doing the research, and so when I put all that together and pondered on it, like I say, I thought, you've got to have the constitution of a bloody elephant for this not to have happened before.
No doubt.
But what it's done, it's allowed me to just to look at things and where I go from here, and it's been very therapeutic. And what happens now is that I have to just stay steady. I mean, I'm still working every day, still doing the social media, still doing the website and the video casts, but it's like Mike Lambert says, with adrenal burnout, slow is fast. You can't push it, or it don't work, and B, it's not good anyway. So it's going to be like another maybe 2-3 months before I'm where I was. And then I'm going to go in another direction, not completely connected, and the other stuff will continue. But I'm going to start really focusing and going into areas that got me into this whole thing years ago, which was questioning the nature of reality, the nature of consciousness, the nature of who we are, and how we interact with this reality, and therefore we can create our experience and create other experiences. Because, coming round to the question about the election, you can talk about revolutions, but there's only one revolution that's going to change anything, and that's the revolution of perception, the revolution of re-evaluating and starting to fully understand the nature of who we are and what we are. Because the whole system is focused on moving our point of attention into the 5 senses. And when you go into 5 sense reality alone, all you can see is limitation. All you can see is I can't, I could never. All you can see is something that can't change because of all the things that are stopping it changing. And this election and everything that I've seen around it, like every other election, is a 5 sense election. It's looking at the world from a 5 sense perspective. It's seeing endless unsolvable problems. It's seeing continual limits and reasons why those problems can't be dealt with and changed and solved. And it's choosing between a series of political parties that all perceive the world and reality from the 5 sense level. So all they can see is 5 sense solutions, which lead to more 5 sense problems. So there's been a lot of talk, not least because of what Russell Brand has been doing, about revolution. And, all the best to Russell, mate. I mean, you do what you like. You make your contribution as you see fit. I'm not, having a go at anyone personally. But when you have someone calling for a revolution who then goes on the video and tells people how they should vote. Well, that is not a revolution. That is a continuation of what's happened all the way through known human history, which is people, leaders, whatever you want to call them, telling people what to do, telling people what they should do, telling people what they must do. And the real revolution is encouraging people to decide for themselves what they want to do, to come to their own conclusions, to give information where that information is not widely available, yes, but then say to people, you are infinite awareness, you are infinite consciousness having an experience, and you can't come to your own conclusions. Someone has to tell you what to think. Someone has to tell you what to do at the ballot box. That's how we got into this mess. That's how psychopaths and people who want power for power's sake, that's how they get into the positions of power, because people give their power to them. And when you do that, those people recycle that power back against the people giving it away. So what we have been looking at under the label of revolution, from don't vote to vote for this party, we've not been seeing a call for revolution. We've been seeing a call for capitulation to the system, which encompasses all parties and which all parties in their various ways represent. And it's all right saying, if you don't vote, you shouldn't have a say and you shouldn't complain when someone gets in. But what they miss is that not voting is not a cop-out, it's a cop-in, it's a statement. It's a statement that you are not going to give your energy and give credibility by engaging with a system that's absolutely rigged. And what you look at, whether it's from the spectrum of the Conservatives and UKIP across to the Green Party, whatever, encompassing them all is that they represent the system. They may say that they oppose the system and they're challenging the system, but when you look at it in any kind of dispassionate observation, you see that they're not challenging the system. They are suggesting different.
Right, we've had a wee break there in connection with David. It might just be internet issues his end. So we'll wait and see, do we get him back. It's 17 minutes past the hour. This is the Richie Allen Show, coming to you live from Manchester in the northwest of England. And I think his connection has dropped out. I reckon internet speeds on the Isle of Wight are probably not as good as they are here. If it comes to it, we can always go to landline. But we'll see, can we get him back up on the Skype, as the sound is obviously a lot better. Plenty of your questions coming in. A couple of questions about his health and chemtrails. We'll ask him that question at some stage. Plenty of other questions as well. I'll get through as many of them as I possibly can, folks. It's not going to be easy because there's a lot to cover, and even though it's a 2-hour programme and I'm not taking the news at the top of the hour, it will absolutely fly by. Right, we may have to do this over the phone. Mr. Icke, your old internet dropped down at a rather opportune moment there, just when you were describing why it doesn't matter which of them gets in, why they will be supporting the system as it is anyway. How timely that was.
That was really strange, because what's just happened has never happened before. They've just completely dropped out. I've had this internet for ages and ages. That has never happened before. Anyway, just a coincidence, nothing to worry about. Where did I get to before I was rudely interrupted?
You were talking about, you talked about brands saying, vote for this person. You said that it's a statement not to vote. That's a statement in itself, because people are waking up to the fact that these people are of the system, by the system and for the system, regardless of what colours they're wearing. In fact, you had a meme on your headlines page today, a wonderful meme with Jacob Rothschild and all the colours of the different parties, which was spot on.
Yeah, well, I mean, where I went with this, I don't know if I got to this before it cut out, is that, when you look at the political parties from the spectrum of Conservative, UKIP across to Green, what you're looking at is different emphasis on the same system. So you get parties that say they're anti-system and they're challenging the system, but actually what they're doing is giving a different emphasis to the system. They're not challenging it. So some will say more taxation, some will say less taxation, but it's more taxation and less taxation within the same system. And this is the system that gets children, young kids, at increasingly early ages now, 3, 4, and it puts them in a situation, 3 or 4 years after they come into this world through the womb, they are sitting at a desk or sitting on a chair in a room, and an authority figure is telling them what they can do, what they can't do, when they can go to the toilet and when they can't, when they can speak and when they can't. And then this goes on through higher schools and then to colleges and universities. And you get the system personnel who have usually been through this entire process and got into university. Often in this country, it's Oxford or Cambridge. And then they go off into the world, to what they want to do in the world. And having come through that system of perception programming, which is what it is, it's not education, then they become the politicians, they become the bankers, they become the journalists and broadcasters, they become the people that run the major companies and all this. And so they've had that programming into a belief in the system and a perception that the system is how it should be and that there's no other way of doing it. When I've spoken at the Oxford Union a few times, this ancient debating society at Oxford University.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
The last time I was there, what they do is you turn up and they give you a bowl of soup or something, and there's some of the students in the Oxford Union sit around the table with you before you go into the chamber and debate. And I was with some, and they were 17, 18, and these people around this table could not perceive of any society that didn't have a hierarchical top-down structure of control. They just couldn't understand it. I mean, there is no other way other than that. Surely it's crazy to think there is. And so you have these system minds, and they invariably end up running the political parties. So you don't get people challenging the system. You get people wanting different emphases on the system. And what happened the other day is I was walking down the seafront here at Ryde, and the Green Party came past in a car saying vote Green on May the 7th. Right. So I thought, well, that's interesting. And so I carried on, and I thought I'd love to ask them a question, but they've gone now. Anyway, I'm carrying on walking down the seafront, and they've done a loop, and they've come back because they're coming up and down the seafront saying vote Green on May the 7th. And I kind of waved them down. And they went round the island and came back and stopped and opened the window. And immediately the lady in the front says, do you want a poster? Do you want a poster? Give me 2 posters. I don't know. I don't want a poster. I just would like to ask you a question. And the question was, do you have, well, first of all, what you're going to do about the banking system? And then do you have a policy in your manifesto to stop private banks creating money out of nothing and charging interest on it?
Brilliant.
And creating the currency as a debt from the moment that it appears.
Question that Brand should have asked Miliband, David.
Yeah. Well, I'll get into that as well in a
Yeah.
second. So, of course, they didn't. And, I stood there explaining to them how how money was created. And they didn't know that. They didn't have a policy on it. And this is a party that's supposed to be challenging the system. And then you look, as I pointed out to them, you look at every party in this election, there's not one single one of them who's even addressing this situation, never mind having a policy to sort it out. And given that the control of the banking system of society is based on the ability to issue money that has never, does not, and will never exist, it doesn't therefore matter in any way in terms of significant change who the heck is in power, because the banking system and those which control it will control everything because they control the very issuing of the currency, the unit of exchange, which dictates, let us not forget, it dictates to people's lives down to whether their own creativity often can be expressed or not expressed. How many people are out there with wonderful creativity, with wonderful, unique contributions to make, both to their own lives and to society in general, who can't because they're working in a bloody call center because they have to earn the money to survive in a system where the money is controlled by a few people. Now, if that's not being addressed, then any election is a complete waste of time. And I was saying, I don't know whether I got to this when before I was cut off. There comes a point, this is real revolution, where people have to make a decision. Are they going to just go on making do election after election? Oh, well, I don't like any of them, but let's vote for the best of a bad bunch. I mean, are we going to do that? Oh, yeah, let's vote Labour this time because they're not as bad as the Tories with austerity. Yeah, but a few years, say they got in. I mean, it looks like no one's going to get in with total power. But then a few years down the line, I mean, someone else is going to come in and change it all. I mean, look what's happened in the last few years. And anyone telling me that Tony Blair, the Labour Prime Minister, is different from David Cameron, the Conservative Prime Minister. I mean, Cameron's just had a face transplant. It's Blair. And so we have to make a decision at some point that we're not going to accept this any longer. We're not going to make do and mend and just kind of struggle on. We're actually going to challenge the fundamentals that allow the few to control the many. And the political system, and thinking that change comes through the political system, is one of the great cul-de-sacs that holds people in servitude. It keeps people on the carousel, sitting on the horse, hoping they're going to catch the one in front, when the carousel is structured so that can never happen. So we have a system symbolic of the carousel that is structured so no real change and no real revolution of human society can take place. And so when people say, vote for this party or vote for that party, it's not a revolution. Like I think I said earlier, it's a capitulation. It's a capitulation to the system because it's accepting that the system it must just struggle on a bit more. Okay, we'll vote for these because I don't think they're quite as bad as them, but they're all representing the system.
That's
I mean,
right.
You look at Ed Miliband. You look at all of them. Ed Miliband has never done anything in his life except be involved in politics. He was brought up in a political family by his political father. The brothers were given politics morning, noon, and night. They go off to school. They go off to university. and then they go into politics as advisors and stuff, and then they become politicians, and then they become ministers or leaders of the party. You've got Cameron with the Conservatives. He's had one job outside of politics in his life, and that was public relations officer for London Weekend Television or something like that. And you've got Clegg of the Liberal Democrats, lifelong political animal. These people, have no comprehension about the people that they're asking to vote for them live, and the challenges they have, and the aspirations that they have. They are so welded to the system. They've not only been through the school system, they've not only been through the university system, they've been through the political system. They have political minds. They have no comprehension for free thought beyond that program. So all they can see as ways of solving problems that go from generation to generation to generation are the same old political answers that have not worked in the past, but they're still proposing them in as ways to go into the future. And of course, the foundation of that is the financial system and how it works. The financial system and the political system are interconnected. They are expressions of each other. Thus, the politicians can see nothing beyond private banks issuing currency called credit that has never, does not, and will never exist. And this is the merry-go-round. This is the fairground ride, the carousel that we keep going round on and round on and round on. And to give us the illusion, to give us the myth that change is possible within this structure that demands that change of any fundamental kind that threatens its existence cannot take place, we have revolutionaries come forward. Under different names through the generations, we have revolutionaries, and they come up and they say, follow me and I'll change this and I'll change that. Oh, you must vote for this party because I've told you to. And then you have a classic example, Richie. I think you've mentioned this on the program several times. In Greece, you have another revolution.
Yeah.
Oh yes, vote for them, and oh yes, they've got in. We've been saved, and you can understand that if you're brought up in Greece and you've been through that horrific austerity, then someone in a hole is desperate for a hand to come down to pull them out of it. And they're not really bothered what color their hand is or where it comes from, but just pull me out. So you can see why people get caught up in this. But does this revolutionary government in Greece, does it want to withdraw from the European Union so it can take control of its country back? No. Does it want to stop private banks issuing currency and charging interest on it? No. Does it want to create its own currency, interest-free, outside of the private banking system? No. And so it's a fake revolution. It is a revolution within the system. And that's what virtually all revolutions are. Communist revolutions, socialist revolutions, socialism, communism are just different names for different ways to organize administratively the same system. And they're all based on a hierarchical structure of the few dictating to the many. Fascism, the few dictating to the many.
Look at Varoufakis.
The few dictating to the many. Socialism, the few dictating to the many. Green politics, although it will say it isn't, but it is in truth, the few dictating to the many. And so, unless we have the real revolution, a revolution of perception, a revolution of sense of possibility, a revolution of the awakening to infinite self and thus infinite possibility, nothing is going to change. And that's why not voting is an incredibly powerful statement, a positive statement that says we're not having this crap any longer. And what you get then is the system and people welded with their minds welded to the system respond with, if you don't vote, you shouldn't complain. And people fought for the vote. Yes, they did. But they fought for a vote because what they were really fighting for was choice, a vote that gave people choice. Any vote that does not give people real choice in how the society moves and what direction it moves in and how it's organized is no vote worth having. Voting for masks on the same face is an illusion to keep people in the myth that they are having an impact on society by putting a cross on a piece of paper every 4 or 5 years. It's a scam. And until we realize this and respond to it by rejecting it, this is going to go on and on and on. And what we don't need is fake revolutionaries who then tell people to support the system, because that's going to take us nowhere.
Absolutely right. Now, it's 22 and a half minutes to the top of the hour. I've got some comments to read out. Do you want to take a wee pause and play that first bit of music? You are calling the shots now, so it's up to you what you want to do.
I don't mind, Rich, whatever you like. I mean, I'm all right.
Right. Well, we can leave the music for a minute then. I'm going to read out a few comments.
Okay.
You've answered Sian's question. Sian was asking, she works in education. If we didn't have the system, what would this country be like? You've answered that already. I've already said that to her there. Everything sounds so clear and obvious when David talks, says Lenin's ghost on Twitter. No wonder those in power have done their best to silence him. I'm going to read a few more of these now. There are a couple of questions in them. You can pick up questions if you want.
Can I just pick that up, Rich, on education?
Yeah, go ahead, yeah.
See, education should be about serving the educated, not the educated serving education. And so what a real first of all, children should not enter any kind of formal education for a lot longer than they do. See, the left side of the brain is what the system wants. In fact, the system is the left side of the brain. That's what it is. If you look at, because for people who haven't come across this, I think most people will have done now, certainly if they've read my books or anything. The left side of the brain is about structure. It's about seeing everything as apart from everything else. It's about language. It's about all the things that we call human society. Basically, what we're living in is a left brain society. And this is mainstream science, that the left brain has very different ways of perceiving the world to the right brain. The right side of the brain is the maverick. It's the artist. It's the inspiration. It's the spontaneous. And what the system doesn't want is spontaneous, creative to the point of seeing beyond the system people. It doesn't want people who think for themselves, who have a unique way of looking at the world. It doesn't want any of that because they're dangerous. You see, the reason that authority has always targeted the mystics and the deep thinkers and the people who are, if you like, mavericks, to use an all-encompassing term, is that mavericks in all their forms are dangerous. Why? Because mavericks and mystics and people like this, genuine ones, I mean, not fakes, they are the ones that show people by what they say and what they do that there is not one way of doing something. There's not one way of looking at anything. There are multiple ways of seeing the same situation. There are multiple ways of responding to it. There are multiple ways of living life. It's a celebration of uniqueness. It's a celebration of diversity. But of course, diversity is the system's worst nightmare, because the more diversity you have, the less you can control from the center. What any system wants, whether it's fascism or communism or socialism or any of these bloody isms, it wants uniformity, centrally dictated uniformity. That's why when any of these isms get control, they make society uniform. What we're seeing with this unfolding global police state and this surveillance state and this destruction of freedom and destruction of free expression is destruction of diversity, destruction of uniqueness, destruction of unique ways to express yourself in what we call life, so that everyone becomes a robotic computer terminal on this system of perception dictatorship. That's what it wants. That's why we're going down that road. And so what an education system should be is something that, A, allows young people, children, just to come into this world and play and ad lib and open up the right side of the brain, which play does fantastically. Why? Because play is about imagination.
And liberation.
Imagination is infinite. We can imagine anything. And thus we are opening ourselves, and we're opening those channels to uniqueness, to limitlessness, to infinite possibility. And so you start to allow, first of all, instead of having the present education system, which at the very earliest age wants to get children into the left side of the brain. That's why they're starting academic type education at an earlier and earlier level. It's to stimulate the left side of the brain at the expense of the right. And then when they've had time to play and to open up these channels to their uniqueness and their uniqueness of expression, their uniqueness of perception, then the education system then says, how do we serve this child? What does this child have? What are this child's passions? What are this child's unique contributions? What are the unique way that this child wants to express his or herself? Okay, we are here to support that and encourage that. And that then would, at the end of this process, would turn out unique individuals who are expressing their unique self, and the world would be transformed. Now, look what the education that we have does. It's creating uniformity. Uniformity. You must pass this exam like everyone else. You must take this lesson like everyone else. You may hate mathematics. You may hate this. You may hate that. It must bore you to tears.
But you have to do it.
Got to do it because you're being shaped not to be a unique expression of infinite awareness, having an experience in this reality. You are being turned and hammered into a cog in a machine which you will have no power over, because the machine is more is all-encompassing in terms of your life, and you're just a cog in it. And when that cog starts to wear out, and my goodness me, are we seeing it now, most blatantly all the time, when that cog starts to wear out and stops serving the machine with what we call age, then they want you out of here as fast as possible. And this is why this stuff has been in my books for years, that this was coming. They've now announced that they are asking all people in this country over 75 and over if they want to be resuscitated if they get ill.
All true.
Right?
All true.
Because they want rid of the cogs that worn out and can't serve the system anymore. It's all a machine. And coming back to this, the word that I was going to come to in the question earlier, by the way, is irrelevant. That's what this election is, irrelevant to anything other than the perpetuation of this machine, because all of these political parties are representing the interests of the machine. What do they say now about education? What do they say all the time? What have they been saying for years and years and years? Education must prepare children for the workplace.
That's right.
Take away the Orwellian language, and it's saying we must prepare children to be a cog in the machine. And therefore, you cannot divorce, you cannot separate politics from education, from banking, from any of these aspects of society, because they're all expressions of the machine, which is dictating the lives of those attached to the machine, which is almost everybody.
Let me just read out a couple of tweets there. I won a bet, by the way. I said I'd never get past 3 tweets before you jumped in. Marvellous. Brilliant stuff. David Icke is on the phone to us tonight. He's on the Skype line to us tonight. It's terrific to have him on the programme again. It's been a while, it really is. He's a great supporter of this programme. But it must be said, when I've said this a few times in the past about him being a great supporter of this programme, he is the greatest supporter of the alternative media. The man has given thousands and thousands of hours of his time to programmes with listeners, to programmes with no listeners, to programmes with millions of listeners, and that's got to be said as well. Now, Sian was back on to say, the teacher, and I love this. She's very interested in your in what you've had to say, and she's been following you for quite a while, has Sian. And she says, I totally agree with David. This is what we're fighting for. We want child-led education. And then she goes on to say, we would like David to front our campaign against testing children at 4 years old. She totally agrees with that. And now I'm going to stagger you, David, because I mentioned to you before that you have a supporter who's in her early teens, and she's in Gurgaon or Gurgaon, I don't know how to pronounce it, in India. Her name is Himanshi. She's a young teenage girl who listens to this programme and has read your books. Extraordinary young girl. She came on the programme a few weeks ago on a Friday. I think it was 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning there on Saturday in India. She said, we go to school to be programmed. We get so much homework. We get hardly any time to socialise at all, says Himanshi in India. And she's a young teenager listening to this programme now.
Hello, Himanshi.
She'd be delighted with that.
It's great to know what you're doing and the fact that you've sussed it, because, you know, it's not about age. It's about mentality. It's not about how long you've been in this world. It's whether you suss it or not. It's how open your mind is. This is why it is absolutely right that there's no fool like an old fool, as the saying goes. Because if you've been through 70, 80 years and not sussed it, well, you know, why not? Really? I mean, obviously, you've not looked outside of the system. And then you get other people of 70, 80 years of age who are just now beginning to, you know, wake up to it and get it. And then you get people like Himanshi, you get teenagers and young people who get it. It's like Martin Luther King said about color. It's not the color of your skin. It's the strength of your character, or words to that effect. It's not how old you are. It's how open your mind is. It's not what race you are. It's not what culture you are. It's how open your mind is. This is the common theme. And Himanshi has brought up something which I've been going on about for years. Homework. What's all that about? Homework? You cannot educate a child for hours and hours a day, at least 5 days a week throughout its childhood and formative years. You can't get enough information for that child needs to go out into the world. I mean, are you having a laugh? Let me tell you what homework's about. And people who set it because they're told to set it, overwhelmingly, not because they're doing what I'm about to say. In the shadows is where this is coming from. You try to be a teacher that bucks the system and see what happens to you, because I describe schools as prisons. They are prisons. The only difference between that and a prison is you're allowed to go home for a few hours at night. But are you? Yes, you are, physically, but you've got your own work. And the longer you go through this education system, the more bloody own work you get, which means what? That even when you leave the pseudo prison, where you're told you must be at this time every day and can't leave till that time every day, throughout your formative years, you've only just come into the world, for goodness sake. Not only that, when you leave the prison physically and go home and have your tea, you've then got to continue with left brain information overwhelmingly while you're at home.
And you fear the consequences then if you don't do it, don't you?
And what is that denying people? What is homework denying children and young people? Play time, imagination time, a unique creativity time. It's all systematic. This is what, people, really I invite them to look at, because this is not by accident. You have a structure of hierarchical power where at the top of the hierarchy, it goes out of the public arena where you can't actually see it. That's where it's really coming from. And then those at the top of the hierarchy that you can see, called government ministers and prime ministers, they introduce legislation, in this case about education, which is dictated from the shadows that no one even gets a chance to vote for, irrelevant as that would be. And then you come down this structure of hierarchical power, you come to head teachers. Head teachers are told what to do by the education system. And these ludicrous Orwellian organizations, which have off in front of their name, like Ofsted for education and all that stuff, Office of Education Control and Dictatorship, it is. In fact, the head of Ofsted, as one of the heads of Ofsted, has come out recently and saying children should start school at 2.
That's right, David. I couldn't believe it when I heard that. Yeah.
Obviously, he went through the education system. It's done nothing for his bloody intelligence, has it?
Oh, it's ridiculous.
So this is what you're dealing with. And then you go through the Ofsteds and the government departments dictating the education system. You go through head teachers and you go to the teachers, and the teachers have to do what the head teacher demands. The head teacher does what the next one above them demands. And so the outcome is what we see, which is in effect pseudo prisons. They even look like prisons. Just around the corner from where I'm talking now, two of my children went there, who are now, strapping adults, and there was a little wall around it, and it was like, waist high wall, and then you had the school, and sometimes kids used to go in and play on the playground, kick a ball about and stuff like that in the evenings. What's the problem with that? You look at it now. It looks like a prison. You used to walk into the school and hello, morning, how are you? Now it's got this big high fence around it, just like a prison. You go through one lock gate, which gets you into part of the school grounds, which is only small anyway, and then you have another one which you have to go through, which is also locked. And I've been in prisons to visit prisoners over the years when they've asked me to go and talk to them about this information. And that's exactly what you do in a prison. You go into one area, and then you go into another area, all enclosed by locked doors, which are open and shut for you. And this is what you're dealing with. And then, of course, what's happening in schools now is you've got all the surveillance, you've got the cameras, you've got more and more. You've got to have fingerprint technology to get your school dinner and all this stuff, particularly in America. And if it's in America, it's everywhere eventually. And it's preparing children to accept a world in which that is happening everywhere. That's what they're doing. Part of the education system now, programming system, is programming young people to accept that surveillance and all that goes with it, that when I was born in 1952, that we in the 50s and 60s would have gone, what the heck is going on? Have you seen this? But we've had something to compare it with, which is when it wasn't happening. Young people today coming into the world, it's already there. It becomes normal to them. So when they go out into the adult world, those that haven't woken up and seen it and realized it, and hallelujah, so many young people are, they accept it in the adult world, more and more of this Orwellian surveillance state, because to them it's normal. It's not outrageous. It's not extreme. And in so many ways, the generations alive today that have had the ability to have the experience that can compare what was with what is are very, very important in pointing out that this is not normal. This is extremely abnormal, and it's extremely extreme, and we should be resisting it. So the education system is fundamental, because in the earliest formative years of people's lives, in all these areas, whether it's preparing people for the Orwellian state or whether it's programming their perceptions of the world, that's where it's done, and everything comes out of that. And when they say, politicians say education, it's so important, education, yeah, but they talk about how many teachers, they talk about exams and all that stuff, and how children are taught and all that stuff, but they don't talk about what they're taught. They don't talk about what they're taught. They don't talk about all this information they're given that is provably not true. And they don't talk about the way that children should be allowed to become their unique selves. They talk about preparing them for the workplace. So the education system is vital, because it's the initial programming system that turns out the adults that serve the system forever.
Now, Sean was back on to say, finally on that, David is right. This is why we have 1,000 teachers leaving the profession every week, because of what David said. I'm going to say hi to Gelasius, to Marley, to Haley, to Karen, to Joanne, to Sarah, to Angela. There's so many people here sending in questions and messages. We're not going to get through all of them. There's loads of them. If I don't mention your name, Kay as well, forgive me for that. We will take a brief pause here, because I want to hear that first song that you chose. It'll give us a chance to grab a little sip of water. And then Himanshi, our young Indian friend, not to patronise her at all, is up. It's the small hours of the morning there, and she has a very good question that she'd like me to put to you. And then I have a question, because I want to talk a little bit about the early days. I've got a question about that. So you chose, the very first song you chose was a moody blues song.
Yeah.
Why? It's a beautiful song. Why does it mean? What does it mean to you?
Well, when I was a kid, from a very early age, I was a daydreamer. So I was always being, funnily enough, given the subject we've been talking about, I was always being told to stop daydreaming. And when you started a new school year and you went into a new class and you picked your desk for the year, I was always first in, or one of the first in. I get one by the window so I could look out on the playing field and just daydream, because the rest of it. I had this instinctive feeling when I was a kid that this education was a waste of time. Yes, the basics, understanding the basics of numbers and things like that, yes. But I instinctively felt this is no use to me. And I've done all my learning as an adult, not through the education system. I left school at 15, which you could in those days. And so this song, Nights in White Satin, when I first heard it, actually, it has a personal story. I was playing for Coventry City Youth Team in Holland, and I was about 15, and I met this girl. I don't even know what her name is now. This Dutch girl who I knew for about 3 days, and this song was all the rage at the time. And so it kind of, I remember it because of that, full enough. Just to think, she was this beautiful girl, and now she'll be like me.
Marvelous.
But what this song does, never mind the words, which are lovely, but it just takes me into a daydream state. And there's a great line in it, which, when I look at it now, really kind of describes what happens to you when you start to awaken. You start to awaken, and you start to see the world in a different way. And it's just starting to, you're just starting to tease out a different view of the world. And it says, beauty I'd always missed with these eyes before. Just what the truth is, I can't say anymore. And that's the start of the awakening. You start to see beauty that in things that you didn't see before because you were too busy going about what the system tells you to go about. And suddenly, just what is the truth? I can't say anymore, because if this is not true, which everyone accepts, what the heck else is not true? What is going on? So that's a lovely line, which kind of encapsulates what it's like when you first start to look at the world through different eyes.
Well, here it is, Icke. We'll play it, and then we'll come back with more from David Icke. David, welcome back. I'm just going to say a couple of things. Then I'm going to ask Himanshi's question, because God love her, she's in India. It's the stupid o'clock in the morning there, and she won't be happy. And I did promise her I'd ask you. So loads of people want to say hello to you. Haley, Mark Holden, I mentioned Martin Houston, the great Martin Noakes, who was such a great help at TPV, big supporter of yours.
Martin, aye.
Legend. And the Tony Blair song, of course. What a legendary guy.
Yeah, great guy.
Great guy Martin is as well. Carl Ingham, so many people. Paul in Spain and Sarah want to ask you about chemtrails and the possible effects of chemtrails on your recent illness, but you can get to that in a second. Himanshi, I'm coming to your question now. I'm just going to bring it up there now. She asked a good question. It's a very good question. Everybody is thinking about this. What are we going to see, David, over the next 12 months? What do you think will happen in 2016? People are talking about a big conflict, a global war. Other people are talking about fake alien invasion. She's really interested in this stuff, is Himanshi. What do you reckon to that?
Well, in simple terms, it's what they plan against what they're allowed to play out. The more people that awaken to the game, the more difficult it's getting. I mean, the fact that they're now trying so hard to suppress the alternative media. I mean, there's a story on my website today about Google and others who are now producing the technology, and they plan to introduce it, which will judge websites by their truthfulness. In other words, they have this technology which they claim, in effect, fact checks websites and stories. And of course, when they say that they are going to rank, and you'll come up in the rankings in Google, etc., based on whether you are truthful enough, what they mean is truthful by the system's version of truth. So what that means is mainstream lying through their teeth media organizations will benefit from this in the Google rankings, and the alternative media that is challenging that untruth will be pushed down. That's the whole idea. It's nothing to do with truth and not truth. Because who decides truth? Well, who decides what truth is? That's who decides it. And that's the system which Google is a fantastically important and fundamental part of. We've not yet seen what Google is really about. It's it's a monster that is in so many ways fundamental to this unfolding agenda. So they're not trying to suppress in every way possible alternative information because it's a laugh. They're doing it because it's a big, big threat to what they're trying to achieve. So the question of what unfolds has to include how this awakening of people to the fact that the world's not like they thought it was, and this awakening to the fact that politicians and representatives of the system don't just tell little lies, they tell massive, massive lies, and they don't just want to control finance because they want more and more money. They want to control finance and the other aspects of the system because they want total, utter control over the human mind and human perceptions from which everything else comes. So it's a question of not just what do they want to do, but how quickly this awakening and awareness expands to make it more and more and more difficult for them to do what they want to do. And these are uncallable things in many ways. In so many ways we've got to just keep working at it and wait and see. But I mean, you'll know from your experience in the mainstream media over the years and as things are now, they can't get away with what they could get away with before among increasingly vast numbers of people. They're not buying it.
Spot on.
The very simple fact, which has become very clear in the last 12 months, that enormous numbers of people have crossed the Rubicon, if you like, of perception to the point where they can actually conceive of events being created to specifically get a response from the public which allows them to change society on the back of that response, what I've been calling for a long time problem, reaction, solution. Because this technique is used so often, all the time, to push this agenda on, it is so significant that more and more people, far more than ever before and growing, are starting to get the idea that this, if not is happening, actually conceivably could be happening. And so it's making people in greater numbers more and more questioning and skeptical of the official story of everything. Of course, not the majority yet, but my goodness me, we're talking about, this journey of mine consciously being going for 25 years. 25 years ago, 20 years ago, 15 years ago, even 10 years ago, there was nothing like this in terms of people questioning the official stories. So what do they want to do? They want a world war. This is what they want to get out of the Middle East. This is what they want to get out of Ukraine. They want a world war. Chaos, when we're dealing with this process of problem, reaction, solution, it comes from the 33rd degree of Freemasonry kind of motto, ordo ab chaos, order out of chaos. What it means is creating chaos and then offering order out of chaos, or perceived order. And the order is pushing the agenda on and changing society in the way that they've long planned. And of course, what happens, and we see it all the time, is that you have chaos, you then have the masquerade of some order. A war may stop, a specific war may stop, and then you have more chaos, another war starts. And so things like ISIS, and it doesn't take too many brain cells on active duty to see what a scam that is. It's massive chaos, and when you have chaos, you are in a position where you can offer the solution out of the chaos. In terms of ISIS, it's bombing the crap out of the Middle East and Syria, which they couldn't get to do before. And so the war and the chaos is a gimme. That's what they always want to create. And one of the major forms of chaos that is definitely in the pipeline is chaos in the financial system. I said in the Perception Deception that it's very, very likely that the next financial crash will be caused by the derivatives market. The derivatives market is basically fresh air masquerading as economic activity. Right. And there was a figure came out a few weeks ago of the trillions of alleged money, because of course it's all fresh air bloody figures on a screen, that is tied up in the derivatives market, but is still being measured as part of the world economy. And an analogy I've used many times, but I think it's very, very appropriate, is the economic system. This is the way they run it. And again, it's a confidence trick. It's a perception trick. You have these cartoons where cartoon characters are chasing each other, and they'll run off the edge of a cliff.
Yeah.
And they'll keep going forward on fresh air while they're concentrating on each other and chasing each other. And then one of them will suddenly look down and realize the land has gone. And when the perception is that there's no land anymore, they crash into the ravine. Well, what they do with the economic system is they build up confidence in the system. Confidence equates in this analogy to the cartoon characters chasing each other on terra firma, on land. Confidence. So what is the economic system? How does it work? You put confidence in the economic system, and people buy shares and people invest, and everything goes up. And then you destroy confidence in the economic system, and everything comes the other way. Now, when you are controlling trillions and trillions of pounds, dollars, passing around the world economic system every day, where you put that fresh air money and where you don't put it, or where you withdraw it from, dictates whether there's confidence in the system or no confidence in the system. It dictates whether people think they're running on terra firma, or whether they look down and realize they're on fresh air. It's all fresh air, but they have the illusion of terra firma because people keep telling them the system's coming out of recession, that the economic signs are good. And so this boom and bust is really just confidence and no confidence, dictated by where the elite put their trillions and where they don't. And this derivatives market is part of this illusion of the world economic monetary system. And it's taken as a measurement of this system as if it really is real, as if it's tangible, as if it really exists. And it's fresh air. It's a gigantic confidence trick. You can say there are hundreds of trillions, or whatever it is, trillions and trillions of pounds, dollars in this derivatives market, but actually there's just figures, theoretical figures in it. And when you have a situation where people have confidence in it because it's the derivatives market, yes, it's a very important part of the economic system and all that stuff, then they're running on terra firma. And then they're told, actually, the derivatives market is just fresh air. Now they're not. And the derivatives market doesn't change. The perception of it changes, and thus you have an economic crash. And because the perception and the theoretical numbers in the derivatives market are so absolutely enormous, I mean, they're near the crash on Mars, Rich, when this comes. But that's what we've talked about housing bubbles, and we've talked about dot-com bubbles. The derivatives bubble is the one that they're really planning to crash. And what will that create? What is it planned to create? Enormous chaos, which is then in search of a solution. And the solution, of course, will be the centralization of global finance with a world central bank and a global cashless electronic currency. Indeed, I've been writing for years and years now, going way, way back, about the plan for the cashless society, which is all about control. And I'm ticking them off now, the countries. I mean, Israel's virtually cashless. Sweden's virtually cashless. The story today about Denmark moving very close to being cashless.
I think Sweden is, David. I think Sweden is now.
It virtually is, yes.
Yeah.
It virtually is, yes. And of course, what a cashless society does, it gives absolute control over people's lives to the computer system that decides if you're going to have money or not money, or if your cashless credit card or whatever it is, microchip it's planned to be, is going to be accepted or not. In other words, are you going to be able to purchase food? Are you going to be able to purchase anything? Whereas when cash is in circulation, you have another way of purchasing. When cash is gone, that's the idea, then what's left is under the dictatorship and under the decision-making of whoever controls the computer system that decides whether they're going to accept your electronic money or not. from your bloody smartphone or whatever.
Yeah.
And you know, this whole area of smartphones and smart meters, it's so important that people appreciate what this is all about. The real long-term agenda, and of course, when long-term is not that long-term, given they want to push this on as fast as possible, is the transhumanist agenda, where they want more and more control of humans, particularly control of our perceptions and our thoughts, technologically. And what they are doing with all these smart technologies is and these Bluetooth things where people go around with them in their ear all the time, and Google Glass and all these technologies, they are preparing and getting people used to interacting very closely with technology, because what they want in the end, in the transhumanist agenda, is technology inside the body. They're talking openly about this.
Openly, yeah.
Because they want. I talk about the body being a biological computer, which in the widest sense it is. But what they want is that biological computer to be connected and attached to technological computer systems and technological processes, which will be able to dictate how that body works, how that body biological computer operates. And see, the reason that they can connect the body, the brain, to a computer, a technological computer, and they can have interaction through the brain through that connection, which makes the computer respond to the brain, is because what they're doing is connecting two computer systems. One's technological in a computer, laptop, PC sense. The other one is a computer in a biological sense, but they're two computers. That's why they can connect them. And this whole smart meter, smart phone, smart car, smart growth, smart television, smart everything, is a developing control system and surveillance system. And in simple terms, everything with smart in front of it is designed to talk to everything with smart in front of it. And what they're doing with all these smart technologies is creating this enormous technological sub-reality, which is designed not just for constant surveillance, which is what smart meters do, but to be able to interact with the human brain, the human body, the human mind, to dictate its perceptions. This is what it's all about. And they're talking now about smart cities, of course, and they're building them. Smart cities are cities in which that you have this energetic, technologically generated sub-reality, which is designed to communicate with the human mind. So people think they're having their own thoughts, they think they're having their own perceptions and their own insights, when actually it's coming from the, this is the word, it's coming from the cloud. You know, they talk about these cloud computer systems now, these information libraries they call clouds and stuff. Well, that whole concept of the cloud is what this smart sub-reality is all about. We now have computers interacting with what they call the cloud. The idea is to have the biological computers we call the human body interacting with the greater cloud in these smart cities through these smart technologies. So, you know, while we're talking about the manipulation of war, and we should, while we're talking about the manipulation of the financial system, and we should not let surely this cloud and obscure what the real fundamental agenda beyond all that is, and that's to turn human beings into computer terminals on a global, if you like, cloud smart grid, so that people's very perceptions of everything are coming from the cloud and not from their unique self. It's the next step on. What they've been doing thus far is manipulating through various means our point of attention, our point of observing everything, thus seeing possibilities of change and what we can do and all that, into the five senses, and out of the greater self, which has the greater insight, which has the big picture, which can see things beyond this illusory matrix. And so that's what they've been doing. What the transhumanist agenda is taking that one step further and pulling our point of attention not just into the five senses, but into this technologically generated sub-reality, which will be dictating our perceptions in an even greater way. You see, it's not just five sense perception. Politicians say this, and the five senses believe it. It's about pushing it one step further into this transhumanist agenda, where the very perceptions themselves come not from politicians and bankers and scientists telling you what to believe, but actually go directly, bypassing all that stuff, and go directly to the human brain mind and implant those perceptions which people think are their own, when it's actually coming from this technologically generated sub-reality. That's the big agenda. That's the one they really want, because everything comes from human perception, human behavior, what we do, what we don't do, what we challenge, what we don't challenge, what we support and we don't support, comes from our perception of the situation involved. So control of perception is the agenda. Everything else, be it banking, be it politics, they're all sub expressions of the key center of everything, which is the control of human perception. And that's the big agenda.
It's massive, isn't it? I've got to mention a few dedications or I'll get killed. You know that now. You'll go away later on and go back to what you're doing. I'll end up getting hammered for not mentioning people. Peter and Pat Martin recently celebrated their 44th wedding anniversary. They're a lovely couple, and their daughter Jade are big supporters of yours, mate. They want to say hello to you. So thanks, Peter, Pat and Jade. Paula Catherine, how you doing, Paula Catherine? Thanks for your nice message for David. Gary Clucky as well. Kay, McCoy and Joe. Thanks, Joe, for your message. And a few emails have come in. Anna is in Switzerland. Anna, how are you? I don't have a question, she says. I'm listening to the show right now. I've been awake for 6 years now, and she's delighted. Listening to David just motivates me to keep going on and going further and further. I'm sure many of the listeners feel this way as well, says Anne. There's loads of them. Folks, if I don't get to them all, don't kill me. Lindsay is in Swansea. Lindsay, how are you? Thanks very much. Julia and Lindsay in Swansea listening in together. I want to say hello to David as well. I suppose I can sneak in my question, and you can be as quick with it or take your time with it as much as you want, and then we'll ask a couple more questions from listeners. I've always one of the things you said very early on tonight, I was kind of pleased about. You said that all those experiences that you had in the early days after meeting Betty and the Wogan show, you said that they stay with you. They leave an indelible mark. And I think you've probably said that before anyway. But you and I were talking one night in London, and we were having a bit of a natter, and I was giving you some of my childhood experiences and how they shaped me and all of that. And I'm glad you kind of touched on that, because I wanted to ask you this question. And when I think of you, I always think of that film, The Shawshank Redemption. I always think of Morgan Freeman's character. And he says to the protagonist, the hero of the film, he says, I'm the only guy in here that's guilty, he says. I'm the only guy who really did commit murder. I'd give nothing more. Or maybe he said it to the parole board. He says, I'd give everything, he says, to be able to go back to the young man starting out and just to whisper in his ear and give him a bit of advice. And if you could go back to 1990, there you are, very, very successful journalist, sports journalist, breakfast TV journalist. You're a great looking guy. You're one of the nation's most well-known and most instantly recognisable TV personalities. But things are changing in your life. What would you say to the young David Icke, given the chance?
Do the same again.
Would you?
I would.
You wouldn't do
I'll tell
anything
you why.
different.
See, to answer that question, Rich, I have to ask myself, am I happy with where I am now? Am I happy with where it's led? Do I feel good about where it's taken me and what I'm doing now? And if the answers to those questions are yes, and they are, then if I change anything, it will change that, or at least could change that, because we are not what we are despite what has happened to us. We are what we are because of what has happened to us, the things we liked and the things we didn't like. And so many things that we are hard on ourselves about, and we talk about mistakes. Mistakes are enormous opportunities to move forward and in your understanding much faster than things always going right. I mean, on a very basic level, I can sit here now and genuinely say, I don't care what people think of me. And that has been so important, because when I open my mouth, I say or write something in a book, it's because that's what I feel. It's not edited. It's not censored on the basis of, if I write this, what will people think of me? I mean, look what I've written about the moon and Saturn and non-human entities. I mean, you know, if you've got any concern with what people think of you, then you ain't going to go down those roads. You're just not going to. And so on my journey, if you like, clearing out that concern for what other people thought was so important, because of what I didn't know at the time. Of course not. But what something deep inside me, beyond the conscious mind, something beyond the world that I was aware of, absolutely knew what was coming. And therefore, if I was going to come out with that stuff, if I was going to challenge the real fundamentals of how we are told the world is and life is and society is, then I couldn't have a personal censor whispering or shouting in my ear saying, or in my head, saying, you can't say that, what will people say? Because if you do, then you're not going to come out with what needs to come out, so that people can see that there are other ways of explaining things. And, you know, I see in the alternative media, and I, you know, I'm a great supporter of the alternative media. I mean, you know, if people want to put information out through the alternative media, I mean, I say round of applause, me. But I do see great chunks of the alternative media imprisoned by pretty much, in many ways, the same perception limitations that the mainstream media has. And they operate in the same way that the mainstream media does, in this sense. The mainstream media will look at what they do, if they're looking at, you know, false flags and 9/11 and all this. And they'll say you're crazy, you're extreme, you know, you're mad. I mean, you're a nutter, you're a conspiracy nut. And what the mainstream media are doing, not in the shadows where they're doing it consciously, but where, you know, why most journalists are doing that and responding like that, is because of what I said earlier. They've been through the system. The system has programmed their perception, and from that programmed perception, they are observing what these people are saying about the world, which is so different from their perception that, well, I must be right. I mean, because I'm credible and I, you know, I've got my feet on the ground, so these must be nuts. And then you look in the alternative media, and if you like, the mainstream of the alternative media, which is kind of most of it, which looks at the 5 sense level only of this conspiracy, they perceive people like me in exactly the same way as the mainstream media perceive them, because I've gone beyond their perception of reality. they can't be wrong, so I must be. And this is why people in the alternative media, so many of them, have opposed me and attacked me every bit as much as the mainstream media have.
That's
Why?
after
Because
plagiarising most of your books. Just after plagiarising most of your books. This is what I find hilarious. And I got into trouble recently for criticising the alternative media. And I said, what I see in the alternative media is 60% plagiarists, liars, and egomaniacs. And they do that with you. They do it with Sagan. They do it with Jim Marrs. And then they go on their programmes and at times seek to put people like you down. And I just have nothing to do with it. I don't see myself as being alternative media. I'm beginning to hate the term, David. I hate it. I really do.
You know, I'm pleased that anyone is putting out information that's in any way challenging the program norm. But what I would say to what we call the alternative media, that if you really want to make a change, and again, we're back to this theme. So many in the alternative media are system people. They still perceive the way forward as tinkering with the system, not replacing the system. And to replace the system, you need a revolution of perception so people can conceive of a different way of society operating and people living their lives and all that. And if you don't have that revolution of perception, then all you can see are ways forward that involve the system. So, for instance, to oppose the imposition of the state, you stockpile weapons and you fight the system. Of course, what the system wants is for you to fight it in that sense, because you have the equivalent of pop guns and they have state-of-the-art technology.
That's right.
And by fighting them, you're giving them the excuse to turn that upon you, and the power of the state upon you. So it's all down in the end to a revolution of perception, which changes everything. Because this world is just the sum total expression of human perception. Change perception, the world changes. It has to. I put a quote on the website today, which says, "Care about what other people think, and you will always be their prisoner." And that's so profound and so relevant to what we're talking about. That I see in the alternative media, for instance, people will not quote me, or they won't have me on their programs, or they'll attack me, because to indicate that they have sympathy or any sympathy with what I'm saying, because I'm this extreme guy that talks about all this other stuff, is to perceive that they're going to lose their credibility with their audience. So they are imprisoned by the fear of what other people think of them, every bit as much as people in the mainstream. And I do smile sometimes when I see people in the alternative media of that mentality who reject things that are outside their belief system by reflex action, who at the same time are calling mainstream society sheeple.
Yeah.
Because it's a simple, kind of equation, really. We are in a body which, by definition, limits our ability to perceive beyond it. We are operating within a tiny frequency band called visible light, which is the tiny band of frequency that we can actually perceive as a visual reality. Beyond that is infinite reality, infinite possibility. And yet we think that in that state, we can know all there is to know. You get religions that believe that all they need to know are between the covers of a single book.
That's right.
And that is not only extraordinary self-deception, it's arrogance beyond belief. And so if we really care about understanding more and more about what we need to understand to appreciate A, our situation, and B, therefore what we can do about it, then we've got to continually expand our minds and expand our sense of possibility and push the cutting edge of understanding forward. Because not to do so is to believe that we know all that we need to know. Well, we never know anything like everything for the reasons I'm talking about. And as Socrates, the ancient Greek philosopher, is supposed to have said, wisdom is knowing how little we know. And that keeps your mind constantly open to all possibilities. It doesn't mean you believe everything, but it's open to all possibility. And this is where the alternative media, I suggest, needs to go. It needs to take off its blinkers as well as complaining about the blinkers it sees in the mainstream. Otherwise, they just become an expression of that they're seeking to oppose, and that will get us nowhere. And again, we all come back to this system. If your mind is attached to the system in terms of your perception, the system's got you. I don't care if you call it alternative media. I don't care if you call it Green Party or, celebrity revolutionary. I don't care. The system's got you. If you're attached, your perception is attached to its perception of reality. We need to go into a completely different state of self-perception and start to see ourselves as infinite awareness, having an experience as what we call a human, as what we call our name, our income, our job, whatever, and stop seeing ourselves as that name, that job, that family history, because they're just experiences. They're not who we are. And the family history, I am my name, I am my job, I am my culture, I am my race, I am my religion, I am the place where I was born. They are all expressions of five sense perception. And if it's all right having those things and enjoying those things, it's an experience. Hey, I come from Manchester, I come from Liverpool, I love being a Scouser and all that. Brilliant. As long as you realize at the same time that is your experience, it's not who you are. What you are is infinite awareness that has no form, that has no body, which is simply aware, having that experience. And that moves your sense of self from little me, I've got no power, I must vote for these politicians to tell me what to do, I must have some celebrity to tell me how to vote, and it takes you into an awareness of self which says, I will decide what I do. I will decide what I perceive. I'll listen to this guy, I'll listen to that lady, but I will then decide what I believe, what I accept, what I'm going to do. And it's taking the power back to the unique self. And you imagine, Rich, if vast numbers of people did that, we have the world that we have today because virtually everybody doesn't do that. When people do that, this world must transform in a way that beggars belief. It won't take people sitting around a table and someone taking minutes. It must change because this world is an expression of the collective perception of human consciousness, human awareness. When that awareness changes, when that perception changes, its expression must change. That's where the revolution comes. We don't need to fight the system. We need to cease to give our perception, our belief system to it, and then we dissolve it because it is an expression of our belief system. We are holding it together by believing in it. It's a myth. It's a scam. It's an illusion. And when we realize that, the illusion must suddenly become subordinate to the dreamer. The dreamer must become subordinate. The dream must become subordinate to the dreamer. At the moment, the system, the dream, is controlling the dreamer, and we must change that around. It's just a change of massive perception of self. There's that great line which says, great saying which goes way back. Once I was clever and I wanted to change the world. Now I am wise and I'm changing myself. That's the revolution. And what happens with this farce of an election and these fake revolutionaries and fake revolutions is they externalize everything. They externalize everything. Thus, they are pulling you into the illusion, thinking you can change the illusion within the illusion. The illusion is a projection. What we need to do is change what's projecting it, and that's collective human perception that the illusion is real. Once we stop believing in it, it's gone. That's where I'm going from here. This is where I'm going from here. I'll still do all the conspiracy stuff. I'll still do the website. I'll still chart all the things that are going on. I'll still do all the things I'm doing now. But where I'm going for the rest of my life, in terms of the books, in terms of the emphasis, I'm going here. Because this is where the real revolution lies. This is where the real change of everything lies. Because instead of screaming at the movie screen, you go to the projector and change the real. That's the revolution. And that's what's being missed by this emphasis at the moment in Britain, and not long from now in the United States, that you can change everything by voting for a mask.
And so many people are still mired in that, unfortunately. I got to read a few more dedications. Richie, great show. I met David 25 years ago in a small hole in Canterbury. David was talking to about a dozen people there. He signed one of his books for me, and he had a lot of time for everyone there. I've recently seen him in Wembley. What an extraordinary journey, says Vic, who's listening in Kent.
That was when I got thrown out of Canterbury Cathedral, Rich.
Did you?
Yes.
For
By
what?
a priest.
You got thrown out of God's house.
Yeah, because they said you can't worship standing up. Because we were just enjoying the energy, you see, but they couldn't work out what we were doing wrong, because we weren't doing any problem or anybody, just standing there quietly. But he had to work out how he could throw me out, and he said, "You can't worship standing up." I asked him for the reference in the Bible to that, you know.
Yeah.
And then he told me that when I challenged him, he said, "You'll have to see the so-and-so who's next in the hierarchy." And then I said, "Well, what?" And then he said, "Well, you'll have to see the dean and all that stuff." I thought, the next on the list has got to be God. It's got to be God I've got to see to question why I'm being thrown out. But yeah, I remember, because of that, I remember exactly that event in Canterbury. Yeah, absolutely.
You did when we spent a lot of time together in London, Caroline, myself, and yourself. You did something that at times we had to try not to laugh because it was so serious. Sometimes we would hear something or see something that's just so ludicrous you can't imagine that anybody could put up with it. And you have this thing, and your sons and your daughter Kerry and Jamie and Gareth, they probably do it behind your back. It's hilarious. You put your hands over your face and you say, "It's madness," because it is madness, isn't it? And we used to laugh thinking it's just.
But you see that is on the awakening. You see,
yeah,
that is an epiphany moment. That is a Damascus moment when you realize it's not you that's mad.
Yeah.
It's the bloody world, and what that does, it then makes it easier, because you don't have to run around saying, why do I think like that and the world's like this? Because the world's mad, mate. Okay, once you realise that, it gets easier. It really does, because if you're trying to understand the world and you're trying to make sense of it as it is, then it will screw you right up. Don't try to make sense of it. It makes no sense. It's mad. The question is, why is it mad? And that's what I go into in books like The Perception Deception, why it's mad. It's systematically mad.
Yeah.
Everything's inverted. It's an inverted world. Therefore, what he's actually saying is perceived as mad. And what is mad is perceived as sane. It's like you're brought up in a psychiatric ward or something like that, a psychiatric hospital, and you've been in there all your life. I mean, what goes on there with what people do and what people say is normal to you. and someone comes in and says, actually, it's not like that, you think they're mad because they're challenging your normal. And when what we do with what we call history is people look back and they say, how could anyone do that? How could anyone believe that? How could they do it? And yet, the very people saying that will be looked upon by people further down the line, and people will say about them, how could they believe that? What were they doing?
Yeah.
Because it's still the same madness. It just takes a different expression. And by madness, I mean unconscious. Unconscious. It's unconscious. It's a state of awareness that is a fraction of our true awareness. It's not madness, really. It's just unconsciousness. And most people are unconscious. And that's not a condemnation, because the system from cradle to grave, as we've described tonight, is designed throughout people's lives to keep them in a state of unconsciousness. So when people awaken to some form of consciousness, because people say, I'm awake now. No, you're not. We're awakening. Because there's, being fully awake is to be fully aware of everything, and we're not there, but we are awakening. They then are able to perceive things that unconscious people are not because they're better or worse, but because they've got a different perception and they're perceived as mad. And so you have again the inversion.
It is a total inversion.
People who are awakening to sanity are perceived by those that aren't as insane, and this world's mad, and you have to become at peace with that, otherwise it drives you crazy. So when people abuse me and stuff like that, it just goes in one ear and out the other. In fact, doesn't even go in one ear, because
it's a waste of their energy, isn't it? I've got
well, it's because I understand why they're doing it, because if I had the perception of the world that they have, then if someone said the things I'm saying, then maybe you'd also think they were crazy. So I do have some understanding of why they do that. I think they'll be aghast when they do awaken eventually, but I do understand, and this is why it's important that we don't get angry and resentful when you get massive abuse, because if you are going to say things that are outside the norm, don't expect a pat on the back from the vast majority. You're going to get ridicule and dismissal and condemnation. And if you can't accept that, then don't go there then, because it goes with the job. Whether it's someone who's talking about this stuff and their family give them a hard time, or their mates at work, or whether it's someone like me, it gets it on a bit of mass scale. It's the same thing. It's the same thing, and we've got to be at peace with it. I put something on the website the other day, which was talking about this, which said that if you are awakening in a fast asleep world, it can be lonely, but is the greatest gift. So enjoy it. Would you want to be those people that are ridiculing and abusing you? No, you
exactly.
wouldn't.
Exactly.
You would want to be who you are. So enjoy it and just accept that, hey, when you get the gift of you're starting to expand your awareness to see things you couldn't see before, one of the consequences of that gift is people who aren't yet doing that but will are going to give you a hard time, maybe. But hey, blimey, it's worth it, for goodness sake. It's worth it for what the gift gives you.
Now, Sue Lee saw you at Brighton many years ago. She still remembers the energy of the closing when we all sat in a circle, and she's been following David ever since. We have exactly 2 minutes, not even, before we have to get out of here.
Blimey, it's flown.
It's flown, and I've not even mentioned you're going back on the road in 2016, which is magnificent news. It was on the website today. Do you want to talk about that for 60 seconds, and then we'll have to wrap up?
Yeah, I said when I did Wembley back in October that would be the last of its kind that I would do, and what I meant by that is that I could no longer, because of I mean, look where it's led, in terms of my health. The workload was such that I couldn't be involved in putting events on anymore, as well as everything else, because you literally are working 7 days a week, not just during the day but in the evenings as well. But what has happened is, two great guys have come forward and said, "We'll do it all. You just got to travel, walk on the stage, and do it." And when I'm on the stage talking, I just absolutely love it, because I'm in another space, another world almost, and it's just wonderful. I mean, it's 10 hours, but it just flies past, and I just love it. I just love doing it. But all that went with it was killing me. Along with everything else. So what's happened is they've. Funnily enough, I was talking to them today, and they've put forward this world tour for 2016, which involves America. That will be New York and San Francisco, definitely, almost certainly Los Angeles. Then it will be South Africa, Johannesburg, and Cape Town. It will be Australia, several. In Australia, they're talking about putting it on at the Sydney Opera House. They're talking about the Madison Square Garden in New York. Then it'll be all over Europe.
Brilliant.
And then finishing up, they plan in Manchester.
In Manchester, where I am, which is amazing. Now, people need to check davidicke.com for details on that. And also there you'll find ways to get David's books. The Perception Deception, his most recent book. You won't read a better book than that in your life, I'm telling you. Get on there and get it. Mate, we've got 15 seconds, because we got to turn this around, as you well know, for your website, for the repeats and all that. Right. I just want to thank you, mate, for supporting this programme. I don't say it enough. It's terrific that you do. And for everything you've done over the years. I think in years to come, people will look back and say, whatever the abuse you might have gotten, people will say, this guy was real, this guy was serious, and we're grateful to have had him on planet Earth. I just want to thank you for that. Thank you. That's
very kind of you, Rich. But I mean, you do a fantastic job here every night, and this program has been a real contribution, not just live, but as it passes around the net, a real contribution to the communication of information, because you're coming from a specific point of asking questions, which involves not just accepting everything, but asking the questions that people want asked, and not taking what people say just because they say it. And that's very, very important.
Well, you're an absolute gentleman for saying that. Glad you're better. Thanks for giving us your time. This programme will begin repeating on davidicke.com and on the other players at 11 p.m. BST, and shortly the podcast will be available as well. Mate, love you. Thanks for doing it, and we'll talk again soon.
Cheers, Rich. Pleasure.
Brilliant stuff. David Icke there on the line to us from the Isle of Wight.
This is the public perception which needs to change. And I completely understand why this perception is held by people. They judge the number of children that go missing by the number of missing children stories on the mainstream news, in the mainstream media. So Madeleine McCann is a big story, yeah. Madeleine McCann is the tip of the tip of the tip of the tip of the tip, and I could go on for hours, of the iceberg.
But as long as we allow the psychopaths who run the world to have an infinite supply of money, they will continue to supply us with an infinite dose of absolute nutcase, totally servile, disgusting, amoral son of a bitches who will support whatever script and agenda they put in front of them. And that's what we have.
With vaccines, vaccinations, and the whole controversy about vaccinations in the alternative media. Before I do that, I want to play you a clip. This is Tony Abbott. If you don't know who he is, don't worry about it. He's a politician. He happens to be the Prime Minister of Australia. And recently, in fact, only a couple of days ago, AlanShow.com/donate, and you can use PayPal, or there are bank account details there if you want to use those. But please do consider helping to keep the programme on the air. It's a terrifically successful programme, I can say that without any ego. To this point, it's getting an enormous audience, and it's going out on more and more and more networks. In fact, we're adding networks all the time. So I need your help to keep it going. At the moment, no sponsorship, entirely listener funded. Go to richieallenshow.com/donate and make a contribution if you can. Thank you for doing it.